So ATS Labs, well, this is, as Greta said, an accelerator for accessibility startups. I'll get into all of that, but the backstory to that is that I'm the founder of this organization called Access to Success, which I launched in 2016, first as a small student club and then as a national not-for-profit organization. A lot of the work that I do stems from my own disabilities. I have hearing loss and what's called Erb's palsy, which is a form of partial paralysis in my left arm. And stemming from that, back in 2017, 18, my team and I, we were doing conferences on inclusive design as part of our efforts. And during one of those conferences, the first one, in fact, I happened to meet a lot of accessibility entrepreneurs. And we got to talking. And those entrepreneurs, it turns out, had a lot in common. They told me things like, they keep getting told from investors, from people in the innovation ecosystem, that your product, your startup will never scale, that disability is a niche market. They keep getting told that they get dismissed very quickly because they're building a hardware product, or that they can't charge their customers too much. How are they going to scale and become profitable? And those entrepreneurs would then tell me that they can't find the answers to these questions, at least not easily, because there are not a lot of people out there who understand the world of accessibility innovation and disability innovation. That's what led me to launching what ultimately became ATS Labs. That, as you know, is Canada's first accelerator for accessibility startups. Now, stemming from those conversations with entrepreneurs, the stuff that we were learning, the stuff that entrepreneurs were telling me that they want, we decided to put together programming that was specifically designed for entrepreneurs such as yourselves. So over the years, we have had 3 cohorts to date, and each cohort usually has over 30 unique and tailored sessions on topics like customer acquisition, revenue models, inclusive design, co-creation, maximizing your use cases so you can scale your product, and a lot of other topics. The thing here, though, is that even something as seemingly basic as customer acquisition, we approach it from the perspective of building an accessibility product. So that means that we'll talk about customer acquisition from a B2C perspective in the disability space, B2B perspective, so that you don't actually have to charge your end beneficiaries that are people with disabilities, and a B2B2C perspective. There will be topics that don't usually get covered anywhere, like Health Canada and FDA processes, or getting into partnerships with healthcare service providers, or accessible marketing. We even have something called Fudge Up Nights, which is where the cohort comes together and shares war stories, their fudge ups, so to speak. It usually turns out to be one of our most popular sessions. Who actually runs these sessions? Not me. I'm not smart enough to do that. To run these sessions, we bring in speakers and mentors from all over the world. So with the 3 cohorts that we have run so far, we've brought in over 130 speakers and mentors, every single one of whom are familiar with accessibility and disability innovation space. So that includes a lot of the faces that are on here. You might recognize many of them. These are people who are the world leaders in topics like inclusive design, such as Christopher Patno here on the bottom left, for instance, who heads up inclusive design and currently in Europe for Google. A lot of the other speakers are C-level leaders or founders of later stage accessibility startups who come in and share their own stories about how they got their product to scale. So for instance, on the top left, you have Andreas Forslund from Cognition, one of the best BCI, brain-computer interface startups out there right now. So these are people who understand what it's like to be in your shoes, so to speak. So they provide their insights that are actually relevant to you and directly applicable to you versus generic advice. You also get to benefit from our expansive and global network. So for instance, I'm the co-founder of this group called the Inclusive Innovation Network, which is an alliance of disability tech accelerators like ATS Labs around the world. So we had people in Australia, Kenya, Hong Kong, New Zealand, Canada, and probably some other locations that I'm forgetting as well. And through the Inclusive Innovations Network, you get to connect with these other accelerators as well and get to tap their networks. We're also a recipient of the Techstars Accelerate Equity Grant, so you get a connection to Techstars as well through us. And then we are part of a Smart Job initiative that was announced at the Clinton Global Summit last year in New York. All of these are resources in addition to the formal and informal partnerships that we have with various disability and accessibility organizations all over the world, all of whom we tap to put them in touch with you so that you can continue growing what you're doing. What I want to emphasize here is that accessibility, when I say that this program is for accessibility startups, it means more than what people generally think of accessibility as. So that may mean a wheelchair startup, yes, which is where people's minds first go to. But it could be, in addition to disability tech, it could be age tech, neurotech, care tech, hear tech, mental health, B2B SaaS products, artificial intelligence, or natural language processing products. All of this, as long as they benefit people with disabilities, whether directly or indirectly, are relevant for the purpose of this program, and you're very likely going to get some really good benefit out of the program. The other thing that I want to emphasize is that we don't usually work with startups or entrepreneurs at the ideation phase. We usually work with people who at least have an MVP and are getting ready to scale. Everything that we do is designed to help accessibility startups scale. It's designed to help you go from your first 5, 10, 50 customers to your next 500, 5,000, 10,000 customers. And how we do that is through inclusive design. Inclusive design is a foundational bedrock of everything that we do at ATS Labs. If you're not familiar with it, inclusive design is a methodology which designs products that allow people with a wide range of abilities to use that product in a manner that best suits them. That's the definition. Let me clarify. Just put your hand up in Zoom, just react somehow. How many of you use electric toothbrushes? I'll wait a second while you figure out the reactions, but go ahead if anybody's still listening. Do you use electric toothbrushes? I see one, somebody doesn't. I see another. Yeah, okay, a few people. Okay, quite a few people. Now, what I don't know if you know this, but electric toothbrushes started off as an accessibility product. They were designed for people with upper limb mobility limitations, such as me, in fact, with my Erb's palsy in my left arm. Now, if I were to try to use a regular toothbrush with my left arm, I can't get that motion in. It's not possible for me to do that. So electric toothbrushes were designed for people like me to make that motion easier and simpler. Turns out it's also really good for everybody else. Because it was designed so flexibly, it ended up being massively successful in the mass market. That's the idea of inclusive design. But here's the thing. I do a lot of workshops on inclusive design. I've attended a lot of sessions on inclusive design. Anytime you hear about inclusive design, the examples that come up, like electric toothbrushes, those examples, their mass market success was always an accident. In every single case, their mass market success was an accident. What we try to do at ATS Labs is try to see how can we help you apply inclusive design to address that scalability question that I know every single one of you have gotten at some point. How do you go from this seemingly niche market, which you and I know is not really a niche market in the first place, but how do you go from that initial market to a much bigger market? We help you do that by applying inclusive design. So what have we done to date? Well, over the 3 cohorts that we have run so far, we have had 30 startups that have gone through the program. over those 30 startups, they've raised over $13 million in cumulative funding to date, including equity and non-dilutive funding. They've generated over $3 million from revenues, and they estimate that they benefited over 500,000 people with disabilities today. Now, obviously, I'm not going to take credit for their work, but I think we had a little bit to contribute to their continued success. Over the years, we've had people tell us how they benefit from ATS Labs, especially given the initial conversations that we had, where they talked about the problems that they face. And we've had people tell us how they've solved specific problems that they were facing, like in case of marketing for the startup called StudyWare. And Emil, by the way, participated in our first ever pilot project in 2019 and is now a consistent speaker at ATS Labs. Another person, Jolene from Brand, who was in our 21 cohort, has received 5-figure partnership opportunities arising from connections that she made through ATS Labs. And Innovation Factory Hamilton's own Matthew Rosato also said some really nice things after participating in ATS Labs last year. We have had people who've gone through the program and generated 5-6 figures worth of revenue generating partnerships. We have had people go through the program who met investors during the program and ended up getting an investment from them. So a lot of good outcomes, measurable outcomes are coming out of this accelerator. If you're interested in ATS Labs 2023, this year's program will run from September to November 2023. It's going to be entirely virtual with up on average 4 hours of programming per week. It will culminate in a demo day on November 30th, which will take place at Microsoft Canada's headquarters in downtown Toronto. It will be a hybrid demo day, so if you can't make it in person, that's totally okay. You can join virtually. Applications are open till July 21st. My colleague Sydney will put in the link to our website in the chat, and she'll also put in a link to our newsletter in the chat if you would like to stay updated on what we're doing. And that brings me to the end of my presentation, so we can open this up for questions.
Perfect. Thanks, Varun. Does anyone have any specific questions for Varun relating to their own business, etc.? Any sort of, even if it's just advice, please feel free.
Feel free to ask me some tough ones. I don't bite. Elizabeth, go ahead.
How are you, Varun? It's nice to see you again. So we're a bit of a weird company in that we have a technology side that focuses on a platform that helps neurodivergent job seekers and neurodivergent support services. But on the other side, we have a program that is introducing neurodiversity in advanced manufacturing and trades. So that's where we have a real challenge trying to find a community that really, we get a lot of, wow, that's great and glad you're doing it. But nobody actually really understands the impact of what we're trying to do or how to. So would we still be in a position, because we're a bit of a weird company, that we could, one, provide benefit and like contribute? Like,
absolutely, absolutely. We've had startups in the neurodiversity space go through the program as well, and it's a perfect fit, in my opinion. The nature of the program is that, one, it's disability agnostic, and that if you're in the disability space, what we are trying to do here will be very relevant to you. The idea of inclusive design and co-creation are going to be very relevant to you. In fact, yeah. I think I remember introducing you to Virginie Kobigo at the University of Ottawa. I may be mistaken, but she runs this group called Open Collaboration for Cognitive Accessibility. And she's going to be coming back to ATS Labs as a speaker on co-creating with neurodiversity in mind. So,
that'd be cool.
So there is most definitely a lot of programming on hand that's going to be very relevant for you. No questions there.
I think when you and I met, we were at still MVP. So we just actually launched 2 weeks ago across Canada with our first client. So we're already starting to. Thank you. Very excited. So like we're past the stage that we were at when you and I first met. So if we have more to offer now, and that would be great. Cool. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
No problem. Creator, I feel like I can just go through the questions coming in the chat.
Sure, if you'd like to go ahead.
Absolutely. So what stages are relevant for the program? Pre-seed and seed stage in particular. As I was saying at the beginning, we don't usually work with startups at the ideation stage. At a minimum, you got to have an MVP, a minimum viable product. You want to show in your application that you've done a little bit of homework, a little bit of co-creation efforts with the disability community to see the problem that you're solving is a real problem, and the solution that you're creating is something that you're co-creating with the community. Beyond the seed stage, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're past the seed stage, if you're approaching the Series A stage, we have had startups go through the program that were generating 6 figures of revenue at the time that they came to us. So it being that large doesn't mean that you're not going to benefit. In fact, one of the founders who shared the feedback that I showed in my slides, Jolene, was doing really well at the time that she joined the program, and I think they benefited a lot. But if you are at Series A stage, I would recommend that reach out to me first, because instead of wasting your time, I would want to make sure that we can actually help you. Similarly, at the ideation stage, we usually receive way more applications than we have spots, and I think we've only made an exception once or twice where they were just past the ideation stage. So if that's where you are, email us. Sydney can drop our contact mailbox in the chat, so just email us and we'll get back to you. Going in the order of questions coming in. So Leanne asked in the chat, what does the 4 hours per week look like? Is it specific dates or times for workshops, or is it part meetings and workshops and part homework? Wondering about scheduling logistics. So 4 hours per week are all sessions. What happens is that most sessions are typically scheduled on Thursdays and Friday mornings EST time. There is pretty much never any homework. We don't really do that, except maybe in the case of pitch training, where you will want to put in the homework if you actually want to benefit from pitch training. Everything else is actually structured as a Q&A with the speakers. We try to do that because, one, we don't want the speakers to come in and just talk at you and do a presentation at you like I did. So we try to do it as a Q&A where we actually direct the conversation to what would be very useful for you. And there may be some additional programming like fudge up nights. Fudge up nights, we like to do that in the late afternoons or early evenings with maybe a beverage or two on hand to make it very casual. So there might be some exceptions like that. I'll add that we recognize that you folks are busy as heck. So we designed the program with that in mind. So we do record every single one of our sessions for exclusive use by participants only. And I cannot emphasize that enough, that those recordings must not be shared externally. And the reason for that is that the kind of speakers we bring in and the kind of conversations we have, they share a lot of behind the scenes, candid insights that they would never share in a public setting. So yes, you can skip some sessions, but obviously we highly recommend joining live as much as possible. Chris, go ahead, and then we'll go to Kelly in the chat.
Hello. Oh, there we go. Just making sure I was there. Two-part question. One, I'm just at the late stages. I am working on a Windows desktop application called Speaking Access that works along with the NVDA screen reader with voice commands. And what my point is along that line, around the time that you go to in September, I'm going to be in a testing stage, or just a little bit before that. And I was wondering if you help out with that, because one of the most cost restrictive things I've run into is finding testers. And I know they're well worth it, but as a startup, I can't afford $200 an hour. And on the second question is that I'm self-financed. I'm not a typical startup. And then I'm old school. I'm going to market with the old way. Because one of the things I found is that with the accessibility technology is that I need complete control, right? Because I've had pricing. If I'm in control, my software goes beyond just the blind. So I have bigger market so I can drop the price. And I'm open to investors, but I've been in some programs where the whole push is like stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. And I'm just not, I've got a product and I want to sell it. Thank you.
Yeah. You're speaking my language, Chris. I think you're likely going to be ready for where you are, given what you've shared very briefly. Why don't you and I set up a call offline, and I can share a little bit more about how we may be able to help. Very briefly for other folks, we can help with testing via connections. Some connections you may already have, others will be net new. Hands-on testing, where we go out and find the testers and help you actually do the testing work, is a separate discussion that's not usually done by ATS Labs, but will help you get there. And I wouldn't worry about the whole VC aspect of it. We've got plenty of bootstrap startups that go through the program that never intend to raise any VC money, so don't worry about that. Tips to make applications stand out. Good question. I've never been asked that. That's a really good question. I think if you can demonstrate one, that you're solving for the right problem. You're not building a so-called disability dongle. You're solving for the right problem. That's one, if you can demonstrate that in our application. Second, that you've done some work to show that the solution that you're creating is the right solution to be creating, or at least is directionally correct, which means that you would have done some basic testing or conversations with the community that you're solving for. And three, that you actually understand the market that you're in. It does not mean that you need to have a disability yourself. That's a very deliberate decision that we made, but you must demonstrate that you understand the market that you're in by co-creating with this community. Quickly running out of time. Freda couldn't get her microphone to work. Do you maybe want to drop your question in the chat instead? Any other questions? Do you guys have a network of investors into disability medical products? Did many of them invest in your startups? Are they available for extended feedback? Do we have a network? Yes, extensive, global. Did many of them invest in your startups? Some investors and some startups. Are they available for extended feedback? Depends. Likely, based on the question, no. And the reason for that is that this is something that is the nature of the investor ecosystem. Investors tell me that they want me to talk to the startups before I send any startups to them. And they count on programs like ATS Labs to serve as sort of a QA test almost before startups reach out to them. I don't know how much I agree with that approach, but that's what I've been told repeatedly. So if you're looking for investors, at the minimum, you and I should have a conversation. And if you're ready, I'd be more than happy to make connections to a few investors. I always do that anyway. If I feel that you're not ready, then I'll also share why that is and what you can do to get ready. By the way, folks, if you feel ATS Labs is not relevant for you for any reason, or if you're hesitant, but just on the boundary, just reach out to me. We can have a chat. I'm not going to push you towards applying. Maybe what you're looking for is just a specific bit of help with a specific bit of problem. And if I can help you answer that problem without actually going through the full program, I'm happy to do that.
That's great. Thank you so much, Varun. So I'm also going to drop the Innovation Factory application form into the chat, or I will send it in a follow-up email. So we did record this session, but I will send out Varun's PowerPoint deck if that's okay.
Please do.
Perfect, along with his information.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Great. And we will go from there. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Once again, I'm quickly going to drop the Innovation Factory application form into the chat. So if anyone is not an Innovation Factory client, but is working in any sort of tech, life sciences, digital media, ICT, any sort of software products, please feel free to find out more about Innovation Factory as well. So thank you, Varun, very much. And I'm sure that you're going to have the slew of questions following the session. So thank you. And hopefully everyone has a great rest of the afternoon.
Thanks so
Perfect.
much, Greta.
Bye,
Thank you everybody
everyone.
for joining.